This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 162, PM Tools. Hey guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Good afternoon.
How's everybody doing?
Great.
My shoulders are a little sore.
From doing what, Nick?
Snow blowing half my neighbor's driveways. We got about 15, 20 inches of wet, heavy snow. So it was a mess yesterday.
Well, it's always customary for us to always start with a weather update. So today should not be any different, right?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting any snow at all. And I was walking my dog and the neighbor was like, yeah, we're getting 15 inches. I was like, I better go get ready for that then. And it was super heavy, super wet. And I think we get about 16, 18 inches. So
wow. I was hiding on a business trip away. So anything that we got, I wasn't going to deal with, but it didn't turn out to be too bad here. Same for you, John?
Yeah, it was fine. I got rain. I did lose power, but I got
two different storms though, right? Last weekend we had a storm that I lost power and internet for 3 days. You did too. And then the storm cleared on Monday, and then we get this one on Wednesday. It's fun, huh? And by the way, I'm Stephen Cross, and joining me as usual, we have John Picozzi from Oomph and Nick Laughlin from Enlightened Development.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so we have a interesting show today, not necessarily Drupal totally specific. It's talking about project management tools that we use to help our projects move along. So these are things that are not necessarily Drupal specific, but we couldn't survive our Drupal projects without these tools. Before we get into that, let's hit on some Drupal news. 8.5 came out this week.
Yes, it came out 2 days ago.
It's amazing, right? How fast these releases are coming out now, like from the past. We keep saying that all the time. Wow, we love this new release schedule. I mean, this stuff just keeps coming and coming.
Yeah, I think it's good and bad.
How's it bad?
I think, and I guess the negative isn't really related to the release schedule. It's just something I've noticed many times. I feel like every comment on a ticket now is 8.5 is coming out. This will be moved to 8.6, or 8.4 is coming out. And you just see like 6 comments in a row where it was this bug came out in 8.0 and it's been moved. So for example, one big one for me that I've seen for about 3 months now is if you have an entity reference field, traditionally you can select a view to use a view to select the fields, and that's been broken on Drupal 8 for a long time. Right. And apparently there's a fix ready, and somebody commented 3 hours, and it was approved and everything. And somebody commented 3 hours before Drupal 8.5 came out saying, hey, this is great. Shouldn't we just commit this? And then 8.5 came out, and I'm just waiting for that ticket to be updated to 8.6.
It's funny because that's the bug I brought up last week in the show.
Yeah.
So it didn't come out in 8.5, huh?
No, it didn't.
You raise an interesting point because, I think the release schedule is rapid, and it's great because there are features that are moving from experimental to actual features in core, and the system itself is being forced to be pushed forward. So that's all great stuff. That's all the stuff we want to see. But I think Nick's right, where the contrib space and the kind of patch ecosystem could be potentially suffering a little bit, where you have an issue. And I think a couple of weeks ago, if not last week, at least the week before, we talked about patching our Drupal sites and how many patches we have on our Drupal sites. And I think one of the things that you may be seeing is that the patch ecosystem is kind of growing exponentially, right? Because every time a new version of Drupal comes out or a release comes out, if it has a major change in it, or it needs to be, basically the patch needs to be re-rolled to make sure that the patch either still works with that version or updated to work with that version. So I think, that's one of the things that I'm noticing too, is that a lot of sites may not be able to be updated quite as quickly as the release schedule is, because something's coming out, you need to wait for a patch, or you need to find time to develop a patch, and then the next thing you know, you're either dealing with a point release or you're dealing with another full release.
Yeah.
And you're kind of getting sidetracked by it because
and
moving too fast.
Yeah, and their focus, because something new has to come out for each major point or minor point release. A lot of energy is being put in new modules rather than fixing some of this other stuff. Whereas in Drupal 7, even though the releases were a little bit slower, a lot of times there were a lot of bug fixes and things. And I think once we get to the first,
I think you're saying a little slower. It was a lot slower, wasn't it?
Yeah. Good point. It was a lot slower with Drupal 7. I think once we get to an LTS for Drupal 8, hopefully we'll start seeing some of that bug fix focus, and then the new features. Because to be honest, I think it's great that it's moving the project forward, and that will help. But since 8.0, I don't think I've used a single one of those experimental or new modules. I might use BigPipe. I think that would be the first one.
Well, BigPipe is the one in this release, right? That is now set as default.
Yeah, it's on.
It's like the first module that went into experiment and kind of went through the whole cycle, and now is like a default turned on in 8.5.
Yeah, right. And that's contrary to Nick's point there. I have used BigPipe. I've used a couple of other experimental modules in Drupal sites through I think 8.2, 8.3 up to this point. So I think that some of the experimental modules are being used, and it's great to be able to say, oh well, we know that this module is either going to be removed from core or added as a a stable module in this version of Drupal. I think personally, the release schedule, as I said, is pushing the platform forward, and I think that's great. I think part of the issue is that people are slow to upgrade, and that the patching and module systems are kind of playing catch up with each release.
And I think I ran into that. I have one site that I upgraded to 8.5 on Wednesday evening just to see what happened, and it broke. So I got a white screen on it, and I do think it's because there's a module issue with one of the modules that I'm using. I haven't looked into it anymore yet. I haven't had time, but it could be related to what you're saying, John, is that even contributors can't keep up with it. But some of the other things going on with 8.5, something you should look at. I think the big thing here maybe is the media module being upgraded significantly. I'm not familiar with what those significant features are yet. I don't know if anyone else has any insight into it, but I will be looking at it over the next few days.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking at. I'm a little gun shy with the media module because I feel like every time I tried to use it in Drupal 7, I ended up having to rip it out because it didn't quite work the way you would expect, and it was always a mess. So I'm a little gun shy, but if they've baked it in and done the usual, I think I'll start using it in the future. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think a lot of these features, whether they're stable or they're experimental, the other challenge with the release cycle is the fact that you don't have, you never have as much time as you would like to be able to kind of play with these things and see how they work, right? So, I know that settings tray is stable now. Content moderation is also stable, I believe. Content moderation is one of those modules where if you've used Workbench, you kind of know how that's going to work. The settings tray is a little bit different, where it's sliding in different settings for different options on the side of the page, as opposed to loading in an overlay or doing some sort of load. But media and the layout builder are two areas where I feel like I'd really like to get in and kind of play around with those a little bit more, to see how they work, to make sure I'm right with Nick. Media has always been kind of a point of contention for me, because it's never really quite worked as easy as some of the other solutions out there for media management. So I'm eager to get in and see how that works. And really, it's one of the reasons I like to go to DrupalCons, and I find DrupalCon to be valuable. Is not only can I go and see certain people talk about these experimental and new modules, core modules, but also you can get a little bit of time to kind of kick the wheels and see how they work.
I think you need to be a little bit careful with the media module and to not set your expectations too high. So take a look at the release notes for 8.5, and I think you'll see in the release notes that there's been some movement forward, but there's still a lot of work that they call coming soon kind of situation. In one particular project I'm working on, the media module has been a real problem for us in 7, and we're using it. So I'm really looking forward to see this finally get fixed at some point in Drupal 8, and we're definitely heading in the right direction, which is great.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to point out before we move off of 8.5 is the note. I don't know if you guys saw that PHP 7.2 is supported, but we've got 12 months to get off of 5.5 and 5.6.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to start looking into that. I still support a couple of older sites, so I have 5.6 on my machine right now. But I've been moving more and more towards Docker anyway, so I'll probably be making the switch where my local machine uses PHP 7, and I'll use Docker for the older stuff.
I mean, I think at this point it only makes sense. We've been using or trying to use PHP 7 for a while now, and I think we have one Drupal 7 site maybe that still needs to be on 5.6 for some reason. But I think just in performance alone, PHP 7 makes a lot of sense. So I'm excited to see kind of the Drupal community pushing that one forward.
Yeah, it makes sense. And we can wrap up here with some issues with Drudge.
Yeah, you had forwarded an email to us from Acquia, I think yesterday, about some security issues with Drudge, and I looked into it a little bit. I think it's kind of interesting. The security issue is on older versions of Drudge, and from what I understand, it's only related to using the SQL sanitize command, which I believe downloads a copy of your database, but maybe it just works on the existing database. But from what I understand, it downloads a copy of the database and makes some changes to some of the entries in the database in order to sanitize it and clean it up. And the security concern for this process seems to be that by default, or in general, Drudge would change. My dog just ran into the door. I don't know what he's doing.
He seems to be getting a little agitated today.
Yeah. SQL Sanitize resets every user's password to the password. And so if you have a database that's been sanitized, you can log in as a new user. The newest versions of Drudge and the backported update for Drudge, I guess, changes that behavior to using a random password. So if you have Drudge, you can log in as any user anyway. But I guess it's a concern because if you put a sanitized database up for somebody, people could access anybody else's account. So I think it's interesting that that was brought up.
All right, let's move on to our key topic for today: project management tools. I know we all love tools. We all use many of them. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of tools do we use first. What types? So when I say types of tools, I'm thinking about tools that we interface with our customers to project-related information, collaboration kind of things, tools that we use to track tickets, issues, time tracking. I mean, the list goes on and on of kinds of tools that we use. So let's talk about interfacing with customers first. Well, what do you guys think is important for a tool that you're interfacing with a customer regarding a project? So there's a couple of kinds of things you interface with customers about. One is project status, times, deliveries, and then there is just collaboration.
Yeah, I think that covers the two most important things. I mean, you when you're working with your client, you want to be able to communicate clearly what's going on with the project, and you want them to be able to provide feedback. I think it's important. Most project management tools also provide some sort of history, so you can always, if you agree to something, you can always look back to that and point to that when you're working on the project. But I think one of the other things that we didn't mention with client interaction is ease of use is a little bit more important. I think developers are a little bit more prone to using a painful tool and learning an interface. But when you're working with the client, the tool you choose kind of reflects on you. So you want to make sure you use something that's straightforward and easy to understand and easy to sign up. So if you have a client that has many users or many different people that need to sign up, you want them to be able to easily, without training each and every person, you want them to easily be able to log in and contribute.
So we were kind of debating before the show on the way to attack this conversation, right? Do we do it from a tool perspective or a category? So like as we're in it right now, I'm thinking, let's chat about some of the tools that we like to interface with customers, use to interface with customers.
I would also put this out there that obviously none of us are project managers.
Oh, absolutely.
I know Nick and Steven, you're kind of running your own businesses, so you do a little bit of project management. And I work with our project management team in a lot of these tools. But in most cases, I'm on the flip side of that, where I'm either communicating with the client or completing a Jira ticket, not necessarily on the project management side, but we're gonna give it our best.
No, but that's an interesting. Thanks, John, for bringing that up, because we're not coming at this from a Gantt chart kind of approach to project management. We're coming at this from Drupal developers who are working on some bigger projects with groups of people and the tools that we're using to accomplish that. And also, I do think it extends a little bit to we all project manage in our lives too. We're not just managing the things that we're doing with Drupal, but we're using some tools to manage things that we're doing day to day on all kinds of stuff. So we're gonna, I think, go into that area a little bit as well.
So I think like the first tool in the list here is Basecamp, and I have a love-hate relationship with Basecamp, and I think most people. Do
you know what, John? I think we could say that for every single tool that we have on this list, right?
I think there's only one tool in here that I enjoy. I don't really have any major complaints with.
Can't wait to hear which one it is.
Slack? No, not Slack.
That would probably be mine if I had to choose one. But anyway, what I was going to say about Basecamp is in this list here, it's simple to use. It is simple to use. You can collaborate with customers, and that's actually how we use it. So internally for our ticketing system, issue system, we use Jira, but with clients, we use Basecamp for outward communication. So on the day-to-day, our development team doesn't necessarily go into Basecamp. Our PM team is using Basecamp to send clients files, communicate projects, timelines to clients, and that sort of thing. We've actually
so John, in your organization, you've got a PM team of people who are interfacing with customers that is in a tool that's independent from the PMs communicating with the developers.
Correct. Yep.
Because those two tools don't So Jira and Basecamp, as far as I know, they're not integrated in any way.
We do not have them integrated. I'm sure there's probably some integration out there if you dug deep. Right. And, to be fair, like some of our development team members, some of our senior engineering team are in Basecamp and do have to reply to clients directly.
Right. Sure.
But mostly, yes, the PMs are doing that, and then they're either updating Jira tickets or communicating that to the development team.
And I think Basecamp really makes its mark with client communication. I think two of the things that it does really well is it allows you to segregate conversations and add people as needed. It's really easy to join. And it was, I think it was one of the first ones that integrated email seamlessly. So you can just respond to an email and it gets put in the conversation on Basecamp. As far as project management, one of the reasons why it doesn't get used by developers as much is it doesn't give you, ticket tracking really. It just gives, the only thing it really gives you is to-do lists, which are sometimes good for punch lists with clients, or if you need a client to provide something. But if you're doing anything more complex, it kind of falls short. I've used Basecamp extensively, but never, but only with clients that are using it already. I've never introduced it with a client.
So it's interesting because typically our approach is that we have a set of tools that we use, and we tell our clients, hey, we're going to use these tools, and very rarely do clients say no to that. There have been instances where some clients have said, no, I will absolutely not use Basecamp because I despise it. So that does happen. And one thing that drives me nuts about Basecamp, and I just ran into this the other day, and we're not going to turn this into a Basecamp bashing session.
Yeah, that's not what this is, right?
It's important to know that it does not do this thing, right? So inline images, like if you were going to write to a client about hey, follow step 1 and click this button, follow step 2 and click that button. In certain versions of Basecamp, I understand that in Basecamp 3, this may have been addressed, but in Basecamp 2, you don't have that option. You can attach all the images to the end of your message and reference them in your text via attachment 1, attachment 2, but you cannot inline embed them. So one thing that I will say about all these tools, if you're not familiar with them or you're new to them, definitely take them for a test drive and make sure that they're going to fit your needs.
So would you agree with my summary of Basecamp is that it's a perfect replacement? It's a narrative tool and it's a perfect replacement for email.
Yeah, I would say that's a great synopsis. It is a great tool to kind of catalog conversations so that they're not in one person's email account. Definitely. But
the thing is with something like Basecamp, and while we're on this topic of these narrative tools, do you have another tool that falls into this category of what Basecamp does? Because I don't think there is one that I've used.
The only other one I think is email, but it requires a lot more management.
Right.
I don't know. I think, you might be able to get away with using something like Trello in that kind of regard, or even Jira. Jira does do a great job of having tickets, keeping conversations, keeping information. The only downfall is it's kind of hard. It's kind of a lot for a client to understand.
It is, yeah. I think when you look at the simplification and interfacing with a customer, I haven't used anything as easy as Basecamp.
I think Trello is the only one that approaches the ease of use, but it takes a little bit of a paradigm shift to understand cards. But yeah, I agree. Basecamp is good for that client communication.
All right, so let's kind of go to a different category now. Let's talk about ticket tracking. So when we say that, we're thinking of tasks that you're tracking, working with a group of people working on these tasks and organizing them.
I have used so many different ticketing systems. So I think we're going to end up spending most of our time talking about one particular one. So just before we talk about Jira, I just wanted to very quickly mention a couple of other ticketing systems that I've used. One is Redmine. Redmine, I use personally sometimes because it is available on DigitalOcean as one of their images. Redmine is a Ruby project, and it just has very basic project and ticketing. So you can create a project and you can add tickets to that project. You can add clients to it. It'll generate Gantt charts, and it's a project management tool. It's a little rough looking, but it's free and it works fairly well.
Do you think cost plays a role in people selecting these kinds of tools?
Absolutely. I think it's
the driving force for smaller organizations and smaller projects.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why I don't use Jira, on the smaller projects is just the cost factor. Although I think there's a new, their pricing tool is their pricing model is kind of weird. I think there's a way to get a free version that you self-host that you can put smaller projects on, but it's not clear if that's a permanent solution or not. Another system that I've started looking at, there's actually a Drupal distribution. I believe it's called Ticketing, and we'll provide a link in the show notes for this as well. And it sets up the same thing. It allows you to put tickets. You create a node that's a project, and you can attach tickets to that project. And it seems to work fairly well. It's missing. The last time I evaluated it, I remember it was missing a few features, and wasn't the easiest to create the relationships that you would expect. So that's why I'm not using that right now. And I think the final one before we dig into the one that is the most popular, I've used Rally as well. And Rally is, just another company. Their interface is one of the more challenging. If you think Jira's interface is challenging, then you haven't used Rally, because Rally is by far the most challenging.
Sounds thankfully so.
Oh God, I was not a fan when I had to use that. You could just never figure out what was going on.
Have you guys created any homegrown ticketing systems?
No.
I started to, and then realized how much work would go into it, and abandoned that pretty quickly.
Over my career, I'm actually trying to think back of all the different systems that I've used for this sort of stuff. And there have been a couple of different kind of systems out there, but Basecamp has been used for issue tracking. Basecamp does provide like to-do lists and issue kind of assignment functionality. Not sure that it's really the best use of that tool. We currently use Jira. That's what we use here at Oomph. I just remember back a long time ago, I worked for this company that was actually using their like time tracking system to like create tickets. And it was very much like, hey, you get like this ticket and you have to associate time with it, but like that's about it. And the title of it is the description. So I guess my point here again is figure out what works best for you, because there are a lot of different solutions out there. There are a lot of different price points as well. So that definitely comes into play. I think I see we have Trello on the list here, and I haven't used Trello all that much, but the way that I kind of see it, you could use it as kind of an issue tracking tool or a way to kind of manage issues.
So is Trello not part of the Jira tool suite, or are they connected in some way, or purchased, or
they were just purchased?
I thought so. Okay, I thought there was something happening there with that.
I wasn't aware.
Yeah, they just got purchased by Atlassian.
Atlassian. Okay, that's what I thought. And it's my understanding that the idea would be that you use Jira. Sorry, laughing at Nick's child there, moaning and groaning.
Yeah, I don't know what his problem is today.
Cabin fever, too much snow.
Yeah,
he loves the snow. It's up to his belly, and he starts leaping around and chasing snowballs and tunneling under the snow. So he's happy. He probably just wants to go outside.
So I don't know where I got this impression, but I have the impression that the idea with Trello was that it was going to be sort of a customer-facing opportunity on the Jira side. Is you guys aren't using that? John, I thought I heard that from you.
No,
Okay.
no, we're not. I actually wasn't even aware that was one of Atlassian's product offerings. So if you go to the Atlassian website, you can see Jira in there. You can see Confluence, which is a document collaboration tool.
Yeah.
We have used that in the past. Trello is now there, which it now states as collaborate visually on any project. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's my understanding of how it was positioned as a product. Yeah.
So yeah, I think later on we'll probably talk about HipChat, and there's also Bitbucket too for Git. That kind of Atlassian has other products, but we don't need to kind of talk about those today because they're not really PM tools. Well,
I think they are. I mean, managing a project is communication, so I think those kind of tools do play a role in this. So Nick has mentioned that Jira is the big guy on the corner now that everyone's using. I mean, do you guys agree with that? And I mean, I think that's the way it is in my world.
Yeah, I mean, once you get past the learning curve of Jira, let's put it that way. Once you get past the learning curve of Jira, I think it's really powerful and you can do a lot with it. I think it's, for the most part, well organized and allows you to, we actually use it for time tracking too. We're using Tempo, which is an add-on for Jira. So, you could do a lot right from within Jira. You even can do different types of integrations. I said, Bitbucket is one of their services. You can do like Bitbucket integrations where you push a piece of code, it updates the ticket to say it's been pushed. So yeah, I would say that Atlassian's really doing a great job with their kind of product offerings in this space. And I think we're always looking for different solutions for time tracking and issue tracking, that sort of thing. But I think Jira is probably the top of the game right now.
Jira is the tool to work with a development team. It's I would not recommend it for interfacing with customers. So it's really for not even a single guy working on something. It's a team of people. It's a team tool for tracking issues, right?
I think its utility is it's closely tied to whoever's setting it up. I mean, if it's set up well, it's extremely powerful. Mm-hmm. If it's set up poorly, you can't get anything done. And I think my initial experience with it was with somebody who didn't quite know how to set it up. And that's why the learning curve was so difficult. But since then, I've worked with teams that have dedicated PMs that just their job is to work on Jira, and it just makes everything so much easier. But I agree with your assessment. It's not customer facing. Just too much stuff going on the screen.
So I think the next logical place, and Steven kind of brought this up as far as like communication, right? So these are all like a lot of a PM's job is communicating with different people and different teams, and the tools that they use to do that. And I think one thing that we all use, I know we all use it because we have a channel, is Slack, right? We have a Talking Drupal Slack channel that we are all part of and communicate via that. Here at Oomph, we use Slack. I know the Drupal community uses Slack. So Slack's kind of growing in popularity everywhere. And
I even use Slack, and it's just me in my own Slack.
We use it as like a reminders list, sort of.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because
I use it for note taking and things.
It's funny because I use it to Slack to myself things from different machines and platforms.
Yep.
It's a self-communicating tool, absolutely.
So there's a little inside baseball. There's another way you can use Slack. We used to use HipChat, which had integrations into Jira, because that's another Atlassian product. we switched over to Slack, and Slack's got a bunch of integrations. Integrates into Google Docs, integrates into I think you can integrate into a bunch of different platforms, and you can do a bunch of different things with Slack because they have a pretty open API. To be fair, so does HipChat. Yeah, I think right now Slack's probably the front runner in the kind of
clearly in the world we're in. Almost everyone's using it. So yeah, Slack is. But there is a Slack overload, right? I mean, I went through a purge process about 3 months ago that I had to just get off some Slack channels. I stepped away from my computer for 2 hours yesterday, came back, and I had 75 Slack messages.
So that's interesting. That's interesting you say that, because I've actually configured my Slack so that only certain channels will like religiously ping me.
Right.
Talking Drupal, the Oomph channel, those are channels that no matter who says what, I want to know about it.
Right.
But for example, and I know don't send me nasty grams on Twitter, but the Drupal channel, the Drupal support channel, Drupal event organizers, the various other channels that I'm a member of. I've configured the account settings so that specifically, like, people have to use my username or say, at here or something very specific to get my attention in those places.
Yeah, I've had to do that as well. Even in individual clients and channels sometimes, because I've got 12 separate Slack clients going on right now, and I've got some clients that have, 50 different channels, and I need to be part of all those channels because I'm working on something related to that. But sometimes you go in there and there's, like you said, there's one where every time somebody pushes a piece of code, it gets put into that channel, and I need to be part of it because if I'm pushing something, I need to make sure it works, but I don't need to see the 350 pushes a day.
So it's pretty interesting, and it's probably a lot different for you guys you're kind of working on a bunch of different projects with a bunch of different people, and you're probably all part of their Slack channels. But the idea of client Slack channels has come up as a topic in a couple of our PM and internal meetings, and there are always differences of opinion on whether like a client Slack channel is a good idea or like a Slack channel per project is a good idea.
I would love to hear an opinion that a customer Slack channel is a good idea. Where would that? I don't mean for like you and I, Nick, who are working with our customers.
No, I know. I have a client that is using it that way actually, and it's pretty good. So they use it for support. So there's a Zen Desk Integration. And so if a client is using one of the apps or the website and they're having trouble, they can say, hey, I need some help. They open up a chat, and that chat creates a Slack channel with a customer support representative.
So is it a replacement for a ticketing system?
Sort of. I mean, it integrates to the ticketing system, so you have history and other people can see it, but it will connect to whoever customer support is connected so they can respond to a bunch of different.
Yeah, I know a bunch of companies are doing that. I know Amazy, their new hosting platform, they're actually using Slack as a support platform where people can ask questions and get support kind of like right away, which is interesting. I will say the client channel can be challenging for productivity. Because it ends up being a constant stream of questions in some cases. As anybody who's read Spider-Man understands, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah. To clarify, the use case I mentioned is a little bit different. It's a private channel between one customer support representative and one client. So it's like you're on the website and you click the chat. You're only seeing the stuff that they're typing to. You don't see any of the clients.
Right.
It's like, hey, I need to reset my password, and they can, or something like that. So
let's talk a little bit about time tracking. It's another part of managing a project, is managing the time related to it.
Yeah. So being that I work with a bunch of different clients, I have to time track in many, many different places.
Right.
And I ran the gamut from using Excel and memory all the way to what I use internally right now. And this is the app that I
imagine
use.
you don't recommend memory, right?
No, it was awful.
Yeah.
The one that I use now, and this is the one app that I have almost no complaints about. I guess the only complaint I have is that I've been using it for 4 years now, and they haven't really had there's been a couple of minor things that said, hey, it'd be nice if I could have this feature. And I haven't noticed a single new feature on this app. But that is FreshBooks. FreshBooks, I pay, I think it's $29.95 a month. I get unlimited clients, projects. And the nice thing is, the two really nice things for me is I can create a project and you can set billing per project, and it can be flat rate or hourly. And the invoicing is super easy and reminders go out automatically. It is probably, aside from my computer itself, the most useful tool that I have for as far as business/project management.
And so I use FreshBooks as well for customer billing, and then for particular customers, like I think the problem you have, Nick, too, is you enter time into a system for yourself to invoice, and then you need to also double enter into your customer's system so they can track. So things end up entering 2 or 3 times, right?
Yeah, I for various clients, I have to enter stuff into Jira, QuickBooks, another company that nobody's ever heard of. I'm currently trying to avoid having to add it into Harvest for.
Yeah, it's just it's a fact of life. I mean, in our world, it's a fact of life. And John, you guys have integrated a product into Jira that works really well.
Yeah, we're using something called Tempo.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's an add-on to Jira or if it's another Atlassian product that's kind of baked in. But
I think it's an add-on.
But it basically allows us to do time tracking per issue. Works pretty well. You enter your time, it tracks, it gives you like a timesheet so you can see, I put in my 8 hours for today, or I need to add time for this. Kind of drag and drop interface. So yeah, it's pretty good for time tracking.
Have you guys explored any of those tools that kind of track what you're doing on your computer and give you a report based on the software you're running during the day, and you can look at it and say, hey, what have I done today? Oh, you spent 4 hours on the browser doing these things, and then 2 hours doing this?
Yeah, I know a couple of my coworkers use kind of like time trackers where they'll start a task and they'll type in just a description of the task, and then they'll stop the task, and they use that to kind of track their day-to-day time spend. One thing that, sometimes you get to like tomorrow or 2 days from now and you're like, what did I do 2 days ago? Like, and this is where the memory thing comes in, right? Not the best way to do time. Another great kind of tip that I've used in the past is looking at GitHub to see what commits I made on that day, to say like, all right, well, I worked on this issue, and I worked on this issue, and I worked on this project, and that kind of helps you kind of remember what you did that day, and you can kind of build a time log from that as well.
But how about to-do lists? Jump over to to-do lists. So we all have time tracking and project management tools we're using. Is anyone using to-do lists that they manage other things that you just need to get done? They could be related to projects you're working on. They could just be related to projects in your life.
So 2 things we have here. We have notebooks and to-do lists. And for both of these, I've actually found that the native Apple apps are really fitting the bill nicely. I can add them on my phone. I can add them I can add notes on my phone. I can add to-dos on my phone via Siri. I can add them on my computer. They're synced everywhere. It's awesome. So yeah, I'm finding the Apple apps are really, really great at that. The other nice thing about, I know we're talking about to-dos, but about notes is you can share notes. So like shopping list, for example, our family shopping list is shared between me and my wife. My wife can add to it. I can add to it. When I get to the store, I just look at it and go through it and buy what we got to buy. So
we use the reminders on the Apple platform for that. We have one called the shopping list with the family, and My daughter is just like, it's magic to her. She throws something on that list and the next day it's in the refrigerator. It's amazing.
I just need to integrate it with like Alexa and Amazon and
it is integrated with my Alexa. So in the refrigerator, if you push the little button on the refrigerator, you talk and it adds it to the shopping list.
Okay. No, but you need to set it to auto order and then
true. Okay.
So for to-do lists, I mean, there's a couple different things that I do. For most projects, I just have a notepad, like a note, and I just write it down. Because usually I don't need to check things off. It's really, I just need a reminder and I delete it when it's gone. For personal projects, usually if I need a to-do list, it's for like a specific thing that I'm doing and I just write it down and then cross it off.
Write it down where?
Piece of paper.
Okay. Well,
like old school.
Just a sticky on your desk, or is it a notebook, or is it
just any random piece of paper lying around?
Okay, all right.
I don't need it anymore. And I'll throw it away. And then if I need something that I need to be able to check stuff off and maybe go back and take notes, there's an app called Workflowy that I use,
right?
And it allows you to drag things around and copy and paste and that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit more full featured. I find that most of the time I'm just using notepads though. And
I've tried lots of to-do lists and notepad tools and stuff, and I could spend hours talking about that. So we'll leave that for another time, and maybe it's not even a part of this show. But hey, anything else you guys want to bring up? We kind of touched on the PM tools a little bit. If anyone has any tools that they'd like to recommend that we mention, or comments on the tools that we've mentioned so far, you could email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can also leave a comment on the website. This episode will be talkingdrupal.com/162. And John Pacozzi, where could people catch up with you outside of your presentation in Nashville?
So before my presentation in Nashville next weekend, actually, on Saturday the 17th, I will be talking at the Nerd Summit in Amherst, Massachusetts. So if you are inclined, live up that way and want to catch up, feel free to come by my talk. You can see me there. You can see me on all of the major social networks at John Pacozzi. And you can find me and my colleagues blogging at umthink.com.
How about you, Nick?
Well, you can find me online pretty much everywhere at NixFan, NICXVAN. I'm not speaking anywhere.
And your dog, does he have a Twitter account or an Instagram or anything?
I'm going to have to create one.
I think it's time.
You can find Nick walking the dog right after this podcast.
Exactly. And I'm Stephen Cross at Stephen Cross with a PH. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Bye.